It was a quiet evening in the small town of Maplewood. The sun had begun its descent, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Birds chirped lazily as they returned to their nests, and the streets were nearly empty except for an occasional car passing by. 12-year-old Jake Thompson pedaled his old, slightly rusted bicycle along the narrow road that led to his house. His backpack bounced against his back with every turn of the wheels, and his sneakers scuffed lightly against the pedals. Jake wasn't in any hurry. He enjoyed these moments of solitude after school, when the world seemed calm and unhurried. He rounded a bend near the edge of town. Something unusual caught his eye. A sleek black car sat parked on the shoulder of the road, its hazard lights blinking rhythmically like tiny fireflies stuck in place. Jake slowed down, his curiosity piqued. He'd seen plenty of cars in his life, but this one stood out. It looked expensive, almost too polished for the dusty country roads of Maplewood. Who could possibly be driving such a fancy vehicle here? Jake stopped his bike a few feet away and squinted at the car. Through the tinted windows, he could make out the silhouette of someone sitting inside. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Should he approach? What if it was dangerous? But then he remembered what his mom always told him. If someone needs help, do your best to lend a hand. Taking a deep breath, Jake pushed his bike closer and called out tentatively, excuse me? Are you okay? The driver's door opened slowly, and a tall man stepped out. He wore a neatly pressed suit, though. His tie was loosened slightly around his collar. His hair was silver gray, and his face carried lines that spoke of years of hard work and experience. Despite his stern appearance, there was a hint of exhaustion in his eyes. "Hey there," the man said, his voice low but kind. "I'm sorry if I startled you. My GPS seems to have gone haywire, and now I'm completely lost." Jake tilted, his head studying the man carefully. Something about him felt familiar, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it. Then it hit him. This was Mr. Harrison Ford, the billionaire who owned factories, stores, and businesses all over the region. Everyone in Maplewood knew his name, even if no one ever saw him in person. Rumors swirled about how he lived in a massive mansion outside town, rarely venturing beyond its gates unless absolutely necessary. "You're Mr. Ford, aren't you?" Jake blurted out before he could stop himself. The man chuckled softly. "Guilty. As charged," he admitted. "And you are?" "Jake," the boy replied quickly. "Jake Thompson." "Well, Jake," Mr. Ford said, leaning against the hood of his car, "it seems I've gotten myself into a bit of a predicament. Do you think you could help me find my way back to the highway?" Jake nodded eagerly. Helping people made him feel useful, especially since he didn't get many opportunities to do so in his everyday life. Besides, showing Mr. Ford the way would give him a chance to explore parts of the countryside he hadn't visited in ages. "Sure thing," Jake exclaimed. "Just follow me. I'll show you the quickest route." With that, Jake hopped back onto his bike and began leading the way. As they traveled, he pointed out landmarks along the route. The old oak tree where kids sometimes carved their initials, the abandoned barn that had become a local legend, and the fork in the road where turning left would take them straight to the highway. Mr. Ford followed closely behind, occasionally rolling down his window to ask questions or thank Jake for his guidance. During the ride, Jake found himself chatting more than usual. He told Mr. Ford about his school, his friends, and how much he loved living in Maplewood despite its quirks. In return, Mr. Ford shared snippets of his own life, how he grew up in a small town not unlike this one, how he worked tirelessly to build his empire, and how he still missed the simplicity of those early days. By the time they reached the highway, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky awash with deep purples and blues. Jake pulled his bike to a stop and turned to face Mr. Ford, who emerged from his car once again. "Thank you, Jake," Mr. Ford said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." "It's no problem," Jake replied, with a shrug. "Happy to help." Mr. Ford reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. "Here," he said, holding it out toward Jake. "Take this. You've earned it." Jake's eyes widened in shock. "Oh no, I can't accept that," he stammered. "I just wanted to help." But Mr. Ford shook his head firmly. "Nonsense. Consider it a token of my gratitude. People like you remind me why it's important to stay connected to communities like Maplewood." Reluctantly, Jake accepted the money, feeling both grateful and embarrassed. As Mr. Ford climbed back into his car and drove off, Jake watched until the taillights disappeared into the distance. Little did he know, this seemingly ordinary encounter would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. That night, as Jake lay in bed replaying the day's events in his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was about to happen. Maybe it was the way Mr. Ford had smiled at him, or maybe it was the weight of the $100 bill, tucked safely in his pocket. Whatever it was, Jake fell asleep with a sense of excitement bubbling in his chest, a feeling that tomorrow might hold surprises he couldn't yet imagine. The next morning, Jake woke up with a sense of anticipation he couldn't quite explain. The sunlight streamed through the cracks in his curtains, casting golden streaks across his room. He stretched lazily, still clutching the $100 bill Mr. Ford had given him the night before. It felt surreal to hold something so valuable, especially when Jake's family usually counted every penny they earned from their small grocery store. His mom worked tirelessly to keep things running smoothly, but money was always tight. Jake got dressed and headed downstairs where the smell of pancakes wafted through the air. His mom stood at the stove, flipping them onto plates while humming a cheerful tune. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled when she saw him. "Morning, sleepyhead," she teased. "You're up early for a Saturday." Jake grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, I guess I am." He hesitated for a moment before pulling out the crumpled bill from his pocket. "Mom, you won't believe what happened yesterday." His mom turned around fully, her spatula still in hand. "What is it?" So Jake told her everything, from spotting Mr. Ford's car on the side of the road to guiding him back to the highway. When he mentioned the $100 bill, his mom raised an eyebrow skeptically. "That's very generous of him," she said slowly. "But are you sure this isn't some kind of prank, or worse, someone trying to take advantage of us?" Jake shook his head vigorously. "No way, Mom. Mr. Ford seemed really nice. He just wanted help finding his way." His mom sighed, setting down the spatula. "Well, if it makes you feel better, we can use the money to pay off some bills or buy groceries. But let's not get our hopes up too high, okay? People like him live in a different world than we do." Jake nodded reluctantly, though deep down he didn't want to dismiss the encounter so easily. Something about Mr. Ford had struck him as genuine, almost like they shared a special connection, even if it was brief. A few days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. Jake went to school, helped his mom at the store after classes, and spent his evenings riding his bike around town. But just as he started to think the whole thing might have been a fluke, something unexpected arrived in the mail, a letter addressed to him. Jake stared at the envelope in disbelief. It was thick and creamy, unlike anything he'd ever received before. His name was written in elegant cursive handwriting, and there was no return address. Curiosity bubbling inside him, he tore it open carefully and unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. The letter read, "Dear Jake, I hope this message finds you well. I've been reflecting on our recent meeting and cannot express how grateful I am for your kindness and assistance. You reminded me of the importance of community and humility, qualities that are all too rare these days. To show my appreciation, I would like to invite you and your mother to join me for dinner at my home this coming Saturday evening. Please let me know if you're able to attend. Sincerely, Harrison Ford." Jake's heart raced as he read the words over and over again. Dinner at Mr. Ford's mansion? This had to be a joke, right? But the letter looked official and the signature matched the man he'd met on the road. Still stunned, Jake ran to find his mom. "Mom," he called out, waving the letter excitedly. "Look at this." She took the letter from him, scanning it quickly. Her expression shifted from confusion to suspicion. "Why would a billionaire invite us to his house?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "This doesn't make any sense." "I don't know," Jake admitted. "But maybe it's real. Maybe he really wants to thank us." His mom frowned, clearly torn. On one hand, accepting an invitation from someone as wealthy and powerful as Mr. Ford felt risky. What if it was some sort of scam? On the other hand, turning down such an opportunity seemed rude, especially since Jake had gone out of his way to help the man. After a long pause, she finally nodded. All right, fine, we'll go. But we need to be careful, Jake. Don't trust anyone too quickly, no matter how nice they seem. Relieved, Jake grinned. Thanks, Mom. You won't regret it, I promise. Saturday. Evening arrived sooner than expected. Jake and his mom spent hours preparing for the visit. They dug out their nicest clothes. Jake wore a button-up shirt and slacks, while his mom opted for a simple yet elegant dress. As they drove toward Mr. Ford's estate, Jake gazed out the window in awe. The mansion loomed ahead, surrounded by manicured lawns and towering trees. Lights illuminated the grand entrance, making it look like something out of a fairy tale. When they pulled into the driveway, a valet greeted them warmly and offered to park their car. Jake followed his mom up the steps, feeling both nervous and excited. Before they could knock, the massive front door swung open, revealing Mr. Ford himself. He looked even more distinguished in person, wearing a tailored suit and exuding an air of quiet confidence. Welcome, he said, extending a hand first to Jake's mom and then to Jake. I'm so glad you could make it. Thank you for having us, Jake's mom replied politely, though her tone remained cautious. Your home is beautiful, Mr. Ford chuckled modestly. It's just a house. Come in. Dinner is waiting. They stepped inside and Jake's jaw dropped. The interior was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, marble floors gleamed underfoot, and paintings adorned the walls. A long dining table sat in the center of the room, set with fine china and sparkling silverware. Everything screamed luxury. As they settled into their seats, Mr. Ford began chatting casually, asking about their lives and sharing stories of his own. He spoke fondly of his childhood in a small town, reminiscing about simpler times before wealth and fame changed everything. Jake listened intently, fascinated by the glimpse into another world. But beneath the surface-level conversation, Jake sensed there was more to this evening than mere hospitality. Mr. Ford kept glancing at him thoughtfully, as if weighing his words carefully. Finally, during dessert, a decadent chocolate cake, Mr. Ford cleared his throat and leaned forward. There's a reason I invited you here tonight, he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Jake, you reminded me of something important the other day. Compassion, generosity. These are traits that often get overlooked in today's fast-paced world, and I want to repay your kindness not just with gifts but with opportunities. Jake blinked, unsure of what to say. His mom stiffened beside him, her guard rising once again. What kind of opportunities? She asked pointedly. Mr. Ford smiled gently. Let me explain. He went on to describe a plan that left both Jake and his mom speechless. From offering to fund Jake's education to mentoring him personally, Mr. Ford laid out a vision that sounded almost too good to be true. Yet despite her initial reservations, Jake's mom couldn't deny the sincerity in his voice, or the potential impact it could have on her son's future. By the end of the evening, Jake's mind was spinning with possibilities. As they drove home, his mom remained silent, lost in thought. But Jake couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in his life, he dared to dream bigger than he ever imagined possible. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test his courage, challenge his beliefs, and ultimately transform his life forever. The drive home from Mr. Ford's mansion was quiet, save for the hum of the car engine and the occasional chirp of crickets outside. Jake sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window but not really seeing anything. His mind replayed every word Mr. Ford had said during dinner, especially the part about funding his education and mentoring him personally. It felt like something out of a dream, a fantasy that kids like him weren't supposed to experience in real life. His mom gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. She hadn't spoken since they left the estate, but Jake could tell she was deep in thought. Finally, as they turned onto their street, she broke the silence. What do you think, Jake? She asked, glancing at him briefly before focusing back on the road. Do you believe him? Do you trust him? Jake hesitated. He wanted to say yes without hesitation, but he also understood why his mom was cautious. People didn't just offer life-changing opportunities out of the blue, not unless they expected something in return. Still, there was something about Mr. Ford that felt different. The way he spoke, the sincerity in his eyes. It all seemed genuine. "I think he means it, Mom," Jake replied softly. "He doesn't have to help us. He already gave me that $100 bill and invited us to his house. Why would he go through all this trouble if he didn't mean it?" His mom sighed deeply. "I don't know, Jake. I want to believe him, too. But we can't afford to be naive. There's always a catch, even if it's not obvious right away." Jake nodded slowly. He knew his mom was trying to protect him, and he appreciated her concern. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was an opportunity he shouldn't pass up. If Mr. Ford truly wanted to help, then maybe, just maybe, this could be his chance to create a better future for himself and his family. Over the next few days, Jake and his mom debated what to do. They weighed the pros and cons, discussed worst-case scenarios, and even consulted a few trusted friends and relatives. Most people advised caution, warning them not to get their hopes up too high. But others encouraged them to take the leap, reminding them that sometimes risks led to incredible rewards. In the end, Jake's mom decided to give Mr. Ford the benefit of the doubt, but with conditions. She called him directly, thanking him for the generous offer and explaining her concerns. To her surprise, Mr. Ford listened patiently and reassured her that his intentions were pure. He promised to keep Jake grounded and ensure that the boy remained connected to his roots, no matter how far he progressed. With her worries somewhat eased, Jake's mom agreed to let him accept the offer. From that moment on, Jake's life began to change in ways he never imagined. Mr. Ford wasted no time putting his plan into action. Within weeks, Jake transferred to a prestigious private school located in the nearby city. The contrast between his old classroom and the new one was staggering. Gone were the worn-out textbooks and creaky desks. Instead, Jake found himself surrounded by state-of-the-art technology, passionate teachers, and classmates who came from all walks of life. At first, he felt overwhelmed, like a fish out of water. But with Mr. Ford's guidance and his own determination, he quickly adapted. Every weekend, Jake visited Mr. Ford's mansion for mentoring sessions. These weren't formal lessons in math or science, but rather conversations about life, leadership, and resilience. Mr. Ford shared stories of his own struggles and triumphs, teaching Jake valuable lessons about perseverance and integrity. He encouraged Jake to think critically, ask questions, and never settle for mediocrity. "You're capable of greatness, Jake," Mr. Ford often told him. "But remember, true success isn't measured by wealth or titles. It's measured by the impact you have on others." These words resonated deeply with Jake. Despite his newfound privileges, he made it a point to stay humble and connected to his community. On weekends when he wasn't with Mr. Ford, he volunteered at his mom's store or helped organize events for local charities. He joined clubs at school, excelling in debate and robotics competitions, and earned the respect of his peers. But not everyone was happy about Jake's sudden rise. Some students whispered behind his back, accusing him of using Mr. Ford to climb the social ladder. Others dismissed his achievements, claiming they were only possible because of his wealthy benefactor. At first, the negativity stung. Jake had always been a kind and friendly person, so hearing such harsh criticism hurt more than he cared to admit. One afternoon, after overhearing a particularly cruel comment in the hallway, Jake stormed into Mr. Ford's study during their weekly session. Tears welled up in his eyes as he recounted the incident, his voice trembling with frustration. "Why does everyone hate me?" he demanded. "I didn't ask for any of this. I'm still the same person I've always been." Mr. Ford listened quietly, letting Jake vent until he ran out of steam. When the boy finally fell silent, slumping into a chair, Mr. Ford leaned forward and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "People will always talk, Jake," he said gently. "Their opinions don't define you. What matters is how you respond to them. Let your actions speak louder than their words." Jake wiped his eyes and nodded, though he still felt uncertain. How could he prove himself to people who refused to see past their prejudices? Determined to rise above the negativity, Jake threw himself into his studies and extracurricular activities with renewed focus. He poured his energy into projects that benefited others, hoping to silence his critics by demonstrating his commitment to making a difference. One of his proudest accomplishments was launching a community initiative to clean up Maplewood's parks. With the help of volunteers, they removed trash, planted trees, and installed benches, transforming neglected spaces into vibrant areas where families could gather. Word of Jake's efforts spread quickly, earning him praise from neighbors and teachers alike. Even some of his harshest critics softened their stance, admitting that maybe they'd judged him too harshly. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn in his favor. Despite these victories, Jake couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to Mr. Ford's generosity than met the eye. Sure, the man claimed he wanted to repay Jake's kindness, but why had he chosen him specifically? Was it purely coincidence, or was there another reason? One Saturday afternoon, while exploring Mr. Ford's sprawling library during a break, between mentoring sessions, Jake stumbled upon a photograph tucked inside a dusty book. Curious, he pulled it out and examined it closely. The picture showed a younger Mr. Ford standing beside a boy who looked eerily similar to Jake. Both wore wide grins, their arms slung casually over each other's shoulders. Jake's heart skipped a beat. Who was this boy? And why did he resemble him so much? Confronting Mr. Ford later that evening, Jake held up the photo and asked bluntly, "Who is this? Why does he look like me?" For the first time since they'd met, Mr. Ford looked genuinely startled. He stared at the photograph, for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a heavy sigh, he gestured for Jake to sit down. "There's something I need to tell you," Mr. Ford began, his voice thick with emotion. "Something I've kept hidden for years." As Jake listened intently, bracing himself for whatever revelation was about to come, he realized that the journey he'd embarked on was far more complicated and meaningful than he'd ever anticipated. Jake sat frozen in his chair, staring at Mr. Ford as the older man took a deep breath. The room felt heavy, the air thick with anticipation. Jake's mind raced with questions, but he forced himself to stay quiet, waiting for Mr. Ford to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the billionaire began. "That boy in the photograph," Mr. Ford said softly, his voice tinged with sadness, "was my son." Jake blinked in surprise. "Your son?" he repeated, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Mr. Ford nodded, his gaze distant as though lost in memories. "His name was Ethan. He was bright, compassionate, and full of life, just like you, but he passed away many years ago, far too young." His voice cracked slightly, and he paused to compose himself before continuing. "Ethan loved helping people. He believed in making the world a better place, even in small ways. When I met you on that road, Jake, it wasn't just your kindness that struck me. It was how much you reminded me of him." Jake's heart sank as the weight of Mr. Ford's words hit him. This wasn't just about repaying a favor or investing in someone's future. It was something deeper, more personal. Mr. Ford saw pieces of his late son in Jake, and that realization left the boy speechless. "I didn't know," Jake murmured finally, clutching the photograph tightly in his hands. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Ford." Mr. Ford managed a faint smile, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you, Jake. But don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong. In fact, meeting you has been healing in a way I never expected. Helping you achieve your dreams feels like honoring Ethan's memory." The room fell silent again, except for the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Jake struggled to process everything he'd just learned. On one hand, it explained so much: why Mr. Ford had gone out of his way to help him, why he seemed genuinely invested in Jake's success. But on the other hand, it added a layer of complexity to their relationship that Jake hadn't anticipated. Was he merely a stand-in for someone else? Or did Mr. Ford truly see value in him beyond the resemblance to his son? Over the next few days, Jake wrestled with these thoughts constantly. At school, he found it hard to concentrate during classes, his mind drifting back to the conversation in Mr. Ford's library. Even when he tried to focus on his community, projects, or spend time with friends, the nagging doubts lingered. Was he living up to Mr. Ford's expectations? Did he deserve the opportunities he'd been given? Or was he simply filling a void left by Ethan's absence? One evening, after another long mentoring session with Mr. Ford, Jake decided to confront his feelings head-on. As they sat together, in the study, sipping hot chocolate, Jake spoke up hesitantly. "Mr. Ford," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, about Ethan. And I guess I'm wondering if you're doing all this because of him or because of me." Mr. Ford set down his mug and looked at Jake intently. For a moment, he didn't say anything, as if weighing his response. Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Jake," he said firmly, "you're not a replacement for Ethan. No one could ever replace him. But meeting you has reminded me of the kind of person he was, the values he stood for. When I look at you, I see potential. I see someone who cares deeply about others and isn't afraid to work hard to make a difference. That's why I want to help you. Not because you remind me of him, but because you deserve it." Jake let out a shaky breath, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude wash over him. It wasn't that Mr. Ford saw Ethan in him, it was that he saw Jake. The real Jake, flaws and all. "Thank you," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. "I won't let you down." Mr. Ford smiled warmly, placing a hand on Jake's shoulder. "I know you won't." With his doubts addressed, Jake threw himself into his studies and projects with renewed determination. He poured his energy into excelling academically, knowing that every achievement was a step closer to fulfilling the promise he'd made, not just to Mr. Ford, but to himself. Outside of school, he continued volunteering in Maplewood, organizing events and initiatives that brought the community together. Slowly but surely, he earned the respect of his peers and neighbors, proving that his success wasn't just about privilege but also about hard work and dedication. But despite his progress, Jake couldn't ignore the whispers that still followed him. Some classmates refused to let go of their skepticism, convinced that Jake's accomplishments were solely due to Mr. Ford's influence. Others mocked him outright, calling him Mr. Ford's pet project, or accusing him of forgetting where he came from. At first, the negativity hurt. Jake had worked tirelessly to earn his place, yet some people refused to acknowledge his efforts. But instead of letting their words get to him, Jake chose to rise above them. He focused on his goals, channeled his frustration into productivity, and leaned on the support of those who truly mattered: his mom, his close friends, and Mr. Ford. One afternoon, while working on a robotics competition project at school, Jake overheard two students gossiping about him in the hallway. They laughed cruelly, mocking his rich benefactor and questioning whether he'd actually built the robot himself. Jake clenched his fists, tempted to confront them, but then remembered Mr. Ford's advice: let your actions speak louder than their words. Instead of engaging, Jake returned to his workstation and doubled his efforts. By the time the competition arrived, his team's robot was flawless, a masterpiece of engineering and innovation. When they won first place, the judges praised Jake's leadership and technical skills, silencing his critics once and for all. As the months passed, Jake grew more confident in who he was and what he stood for. He realized that no matter what others said, he couldn't control their opinions, but he could control how he responded. With Mr. Ford's guidance, he learned to embrace challenges, celebrate victories, and learn from failures. Most importantly, he stayed true to his roots, ensuring that his success benefited not only himself but also the people around him. Yet, even as Jake flourished, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover about Mr. Ford's past. The photograph of Ethan haunted him, a reminder of the pain and loss the older man carried. Jake wondered if there was a way to help Mr. Ford heal further, if their bond could evolve beyond mentorship and become something even deeper. Little did Jake know, the answers he sought were closer than he thought. One fateful evening, while exploring Mr. Ford's attic during a rare visit, Jake stumbled upon a box filled with letters, mementos, and old journals. Curious, he opened one of the journals and began reading. What he discovered inside would change everything he thought. He knew about Mr. Ford and about himself. Jake sat cross-legged on the dusty attic floor, surrounded by boxes stacked haphazardly against the walls. The faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories filled the air as he flipped through the pages of an old journal. Each entry was written in neat, precise handwriting, the same elegant script Jake had seen in the letter Mr. Ford had sent him weeks earlier. As he read, his heart began to race. The journal entries revealed glimpses of a life Jake never imagined Mr. Ford could have lived. It spoke of struggles, financial hardships, failed businesses, and sleepless nights spent wondering how to put food on the table for his family. But it also detailed moments of triumph, the birth of Ethan, the joy of watching him grow into a kind and compassionate young man, and the pride of seeing him graduate high school at the top of his class. But then came the tragedy, a car accident that claimed Ethan's life just days after graduation. The pain in the words was palpable, raw, and unfiltered. Jake felt tears welling up in his eyes as he read about Mr. Ford's grief, his guilt over not being able to protect his son, and his eventual retreat from the world. For years, Mr. Ford buried himself in work, building his empire as a way to cope with his loss. Yet, despite his success, he remained haunted by the void left behind. Jake paused, clutching the journal tightly. He now understood why Mr. Ford had been so drawn to him. It wasn't just because Jake reminded him of Ethan. It was because helping Jake gave Mr. Ford a sense of purpose again. By investing in Jake's future, he was keeping Ethan's spirit alive, honoring the values they both cherished. As Jake continued reading, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a series of letters addressed to Ethan, written long after his death. In them, Mr. Ford poured out his heart, sharing stories, regrets, and hopes for what might have been. One particular passage caught Jake's attention. "Ethan, I miss you more than words can say. Every day feels heavier without you here. But today, something happened that reminded me of you. A boy named Jake stopped to help me when no one else would. His kindness brought me back to a time when the world seemed simpler, when people cared for each other without expecting anything in return. I wish you could meet him, Ethan. You'd like him." Jake's breath hitched as he realized the depth of Mr. Ford's connection to him. This wasn't just about giving Jake opportunities. It was about healing wounds that had festered for years. By mentoring Jake, Mr. Ford was finding peace, not only for himself but also for the memory of his son. When Jake finally descended the attic stairs, the journal tucked safely under his arm, he found Mr. Ford waiting for him in the living room. The older man looked up from his book, startled by Jake's sudden appearance. "I didn't expect to see you up there," Mr. Ford said, raising an eyebrow. "What were you looking for?" Jake hesitated, unsure how to begin. Finally, he held out the journal. "I found this," he said quietly. "And I think I understand now." Mr. Ford's expression shifted from curiosity to unease. He took the journal gently, his fingers tracing the worn cover. "You weren't supposed to find these," he admitted softly. "They're personal." "I know," Jake replied, "but reading them helped me understand why you've done so much for me, and I wanted to thank you for trusting me enough to share your story, even if it wasn't intentional." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mr. Ford sighed deeply, setting the journal aside. "Jake," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "losing Ethan nearly destroyed me. For years, I shut myself off from the world, focusing only on my work. But meeting you, it reminded me of the importance of connection, of kindness, of hope." He paused, looking directly at Jake. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, a reason to keep going. Watching you grow, seeing how you carry yourself with integrity and compassion, it's like having a piece of Ethan back. Not because you're replacing him, but because you embody the qualities he stood for. Tears pricked Jake's eyes as he listened. I don't know what to say, he admitted, except thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance when most people wouldn't have. Mr. Ford smiled, though his eyes glistened with unshed tears. No, Jake, thank you. You've reminded me that life is worth living, even after unimaginable loss. And I hope you'll continue to inspire others the way you've inspired me. Over the next few months, Jake and Mr. Ford grew closer than ever. Their bond evolved from mentorship to friendship, built on mutual respect and shared vulnerability. Jake continued to excel academically and personally, earning accolades for his achievements while staying grounded in his community. Meanwhile, Mr. Ford began opening up more, not just to Jake, but to others around him. He started attending local events, supporting small businesses, and reconnecting with the town he'd once called home. Years passed, and Jake graduated from high school at the top of his class. With Mr. Ford's support, he earned a full scholarship to a prestigious university, where he studied engineering and entrepreneurship. During breaks, he returned to Maplewood, always making time to visit Mr. Ford. Together, they launched several initiatives aimed at improving education and healthcare in underserved communities, ensuring that their impact reached far beyond themselves. Eventually, Mr. Ford passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy of generosity and resilience. In his will, he bequeathed a portion of his fortune to establish a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth achieve their dreams, a cause inspired by Jake's journey. Standing at Mr. Ford's funeral, Jake reflected on everything they'd shared. Though their relationship had begun with a simple act of kindness on a lonely road, it had grown into something extraordinary. Through Mr. Ford, Jake had learned the power of compassion, perseverance, and second chances. And through Jake, Mr. Ford had found redemption and peace. As the sun set over Maplewood, casting golden rays across the cemetery, Jake whispered a silent promise to the man who had changed his life forever. I'll make sure your legacy lives on, he vowed, just like you made sure mine did. In the end, it wasn't wealth or fame that defined their story. It was the profound impact they had on each other's lives, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the greatest transformations.